What's up everybody? I'm going to start today's video by asking you all a question. Have you ever thought about how the popularity of a non-playable Overwatch character influences their chances of one day becoming playable? If you want, go ahead and leave your answer in the comments, though I won't be able to read them until after I've made this video, obviously. But it's a question that's been on my mind a lot recently, as while character popularity may not have played a huge role in the past, there's evidence to suggest that Blizzard may start focusing more on previously established characters and locations when making new content going forward into Overwatch 2. And that may or may not be a good thing. This is Master Ian Gamer, and before we get into it, I want to remind you to subscribe and stroke that bell icon if you enjoy this video, to stay up to date on all future Overwatch news and content. But now, let's take a look at how fan favoritism may be influencing the future of Overwatch 2. Given how abstract of an idea this is, let me start off by running through the history of fan favorite new heroes. At every point in time over the course of Overwatch's life, there has been one or more characters whom the community is exceptionally eager to have in-game. The first of these was Sombra. Thanks to the Sombra ARG, which spanned several months in advance of her addition to the roster, the Overwatch community couldn't help but be hyped for her as a hero. In fact, the hype for Sombra predated the launch of Overwatch itself, due to many clues being discovered in the game's beta, and players expected her to be the first new hero after the game officially released. The first hero, of course, instead ended up being Ana, but the hype for Sombra persisted over the following months up until BlizzCon 2016, where she was finally revealed. After Sombra, the next character to excite the community was Doomfist. He actually got picked up pretty quickly following the release of Sombra and exploded in popularity once the teasers for Orisa started. Much like Ana, most of the community assumed that the Orisa teasers were in fact building up to the release of Doomfist, and to be fair, given their close story ties, nobody could really be faulted for making that assumption. But after Orisa released in March of 2017, the hype for Doomfist never died down. During the following 4 months, Doomfist was the endless talk of the town, arguably becoming even more hyped than Sombra during her ARG. And all of this came to a head in July, when Doomfist finally released. After Doomfist is when new hero hype trends start to get a little messy. The next character to entrance the community was the Junker Queen, who was first made known through the release of Junkertown in August of 2017. She was never quite as unanimously hype-inducing as Sombra or Doomfist, but she managed to edge ahead of other candidates for roughly the next year and a half. During that time, we saw the release of Moira, Brigitte, and Wrecking Ball, all being heroes who'd appeared previously in some form or another, and had varying degrees of community expectation preceding their releases. However, the Overwatch community wouldn't have its next true new hero idol until BlizzCon 2018, where we got the completely unforeseen hero Ashe, but more importantly, our first look at Echo. While the hype for Echo never quite reached the same heights as Sombra or Doomfist, mainly due to Overwatch's overall diminishing popularity, it certainly lasted longer. Between her first appearance in November 2018 and final release in March 2020, Echo was undeniably the fan-favorite future hero. There was maybe a month or two where characters like Mauga or Sojourn surged in popularity, but overall Echo was queen. And that pretty much brings us up to date with her having been released last March. So, my first question following all this is, who's next? Which hero candidate will take up the mantle as most hyped going forward? This question in and of itself is a little strange, given that we know Echo is actually the last new hero to be released before Overwatch 2, which will feature multiple new heroes upon its launch. But there are at least a few candidates who seem to edge ahead as the community's most wanted. My guess for who will become the new hype king or queen leading up to Overwatch 2 is either Mauga, Junker Queen, or Sojourn, given that they're all pretty well known and have been teased by the devs as being heroes in development, with Sojourn even being flat out confirmed as one of the Overwatch 2 launch heroes. But the main thing I want to focus on is that heroes who have been previously established and built up well before their addition to the game have historically had significantly larger impacts in the community. Even if these heroes don't always end up being the most popular in the long run, nothing fuels the fire of excitement quite like seeing further development for a character you're already invested in. So, going forward, will Blizzard focus solely on establishing heroes well before their release so as to continually capitalize on the hype it ultimately generates? Well, Overwatch game director Jeff Kaplan actually addressed this exact question following the release of Echo. In an interview with Games Radar, Jeff had this response when asked about future new heroes. Sometimes we want things to be a surprise. Sometimes we want to deliver on expectations, Kaplan said, citing the long lead up to Doomfist compared to the sudden appearances of Sigma and Baptiste. There's like the running top 3 at any time of who they think is coming next. That's fun for us, when they're like, oh, it's gonna be Mauga, or it's gonna be Junker Queen. Okay, cool. We're glad you're excited for them, and that gives us something to think about. Maybe the next one will be Mauga, maybe the next one will be Junker Queen, or maybe it'll be a new Sigma that you've never heard of before. It's clear from this interview that Jeff plans for there to still be surprise heroes like Ashe, Baptiste, and Sigma going forward, but that doesn't mean Blizzard won't start relying at least a little bit more on utilizing existing fan favorites. And perhaps the biggest indicator of this was the new Overwatch 2 content Blizzard showed off at BlizzCon 2019. Every single new hero, map location, and PvE faction shown in the Overwatch 2 trailers, gameplay, and marketing material were previously established or tied directly into existing content. The 2 new heroes, being Echo and Sojourn, had both been established earlier through things like the Reunion animated short and Storm Rising mission. The 2 enemy PvE factions shown were Talon and Null Sector, both being previously established antagonists, as well as factions we've played against in the existing Archives missions. All the maps shown were tied to existing characters as well. Rio connects to Lucio, Gothenburg to Brigitte and Torbjorn, Monte Carlo to Maximilian, and Utopia to Symmetra. The one which you maybe could argue as being a bit of an outlier was Toronto, which connects to Sojourn, but given that there has long been anticipation for some form of Canadian representation in Overwatch, having both a map and hero revealed for Canada really just plays into what we were already hoping for. Blizzard definitely knew what they were doing when they picked these things as the new content to represent Overwatch 2 at BlizzCon. They knew it would be recognized by the core Overwatch player base, and that seeing it as fleshed out content in Overwatch 2 would help to get players excited for what the sequel has to offer. While we so far don't know much about which heroes besides Sojourn will be added with the sequel, I guarantee you that if Mauga or the Junker Queen are part of that initial launch lineup, we'll be seeing them front and center in future marketing and teasers building up to Overwatch 2's release. Another thing to consider is how community expectations will influence which heroes Blizzard ends up adding to the Overwatch 2 launch lineup. Considering the grand scale of the sequel, they'll likely want to go all out with the hype upon its release. So does that mean they'll be more likely to push out known characters like Mauga and the Junker Queen over other unknown characters that they have in the works? Certainly, game balance will still be an important factor, but I could see them leaning a bit more towards hype-based new hero additions than balance-based ones, at least when the sequel first launches. And while it certainly will garner a lot of backlash, I also can't help but wonder if this push for more hype over balance could mean we see disproportionately more DPS heroes getting added at launch than tanks and supports. While the core community, which includes myself and likely most of you watching this video, may be more interested in seeing new tanks and supports, it's simply a fact that the overall majority of players favor DPS, and thus are more hyped when new damage heroes get added. On top of that, Blizzard doesn't even really need to try appealing to the existing core player base with Overwatch 2. As big fans of the franchise already, we'll probably play the sequel no matter what they stick in it. It's the casual outsiders that Blizzard really has to try and appeal to, and those people just so happen to care more about DPS heroes. Now, before you all freak out in the comments section, I would like to emphasize that this is just me spitballing ideas. We don't know yet how exactly Blizzard will handle the new heroes and other content going forward, but certain factors like the popularity of DPS heroes over tanks and supports cannot be ignored when considering that Blizzard really needs Overwatch 2 to be a big hit with more than just its existing player base. Ideally, Blizzard has a plan that better caters to everyone, but we'll just have to wait and see. Overall though, if nothing else, Overwatch 2 has the luxury of launching with the already massive cast of non-playable characters established in Overwatch 1 and 4+ years of story. From what we can tell, in the grand scheme of things, Overwatch 1 will serve almost as a prequel, where we learn mostly about the old Overwatch organization, Talon, and the Omnic Crisis, leading up to the in-universe present-day events of Overwatch 2. Not only is this a great setup for the story of the sequel, but Overwatch 1 has planted countless seeds that Blizzard can now grow into full-fledged content. From an optimistic standpoint, the story and characters of Overwatch 2 can and should be far better than the original, which hopefully means that we've got a lot to look forward to, both in terms of established characters and brand new surprises, when the sequel finally releases. In the meantime though, while we wait to hear more news about Overwatch 2 and the heroes Blizzard will release with it, feel free to check out my Hero Watch series, where each episode I do a deep dive into a different new hero candidate and evaluate their likeliness to one day join the roster. You can find the full playlist linked in the description and cards on screen, but otherwise let me know your thoughts on Blizzard releasing more popular heroes and content, as well as which hero you personally are most looking forward to by dropping a comment down below. As always, be sure to subscribe, stroke that bell icon, follow me on Twitter at MasterIanGamer, and come join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any future Overwatch content. If you'd like to support my videos, then you can hit that join button down below to become a channel member and unlock some cool rewards like the people you see here. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.